What is going on, guys? Coach Desi from Team Outlier here, and today we're going to take a look at some old school strategies, techniques, and exercises that have sort of fallen out of favor in modern powerlifting programs, but will still absolutely blow up your total. I have got 5 of them here that I'm going to go through in no particular order. So if that sounds good to you, let's go ahead and get right into it, and be sure to click subscribe if you haven't yet so you don't miss future videos like this one. Okay. Old school technique number 1 is working off of pins or from a dead start in general. Old school guys used to do stuff like this all the time on all 3 lifts. Even as early as when you heard about Paul Anderson doing squats from pins of various heights and even digging himself deeper into the ground so that he could progress that range of motion. You also have rack pulls from different heights being an absolute staple of Westside even back in their garage days. And you had guys in the 70s and 80s really advocating for pin pressing. Personally, if I had to rank these in order of how often I actually use them, pin pressing would definitely be number 1. Although I typically like to include the descent phase when I program mine, so actually coming off the J-cups, bringing them down to the pins, and then pressing from that dead stop. This is insanely effective at building power off the chest. After that, I would say block pulls get a little bit more love from me, and then after that only would be pin squats. Although again, this is largely personal preference. Okay, old school strategy number 2 is just rotating exercises. Westsiders and the Russians that they based their training off of were advocates of rotating exercises constantly to avoid stagnation. For them, it was pretty much every single week. While I personally think this goes a little bit far to be optimal for most people, some modern programs never deviate at all from the competition exercises, and introducing a little bit of smart variation can be a really powerful way to upgrade your progress. For me, I'm definitely keeping the competition lift in the driver's seat firmly for at least 2 to 3 blocks leading into a contest. Although outside of that, I may pick a close variation and have that occupy the primary slot for 1 to 2 blocks. On the secondary day, a close variation is usually the norm for me, and I will rotate that roughly every 2 to 3 blocks as well. I find that this approach really gives you the benefits of variation while still allowing you to actually progress at those exercises and allow them to run their course before you cycle them out again. Old school strategy number 3 is actually an exercise, and it's the good morning. I talked about this one a little bit already in my underrated exercises video, but this used to be an absolute staple of old school programs as far back as the 70s and 80s, and back then it feels like it occupied a much higher priority than it does nowadays, where it's often completely absent. This is an outstanding way to absolutely blast the posterior chain from the glutes to the hamstrings to especially the upper and lower back in a way that RDLs just don't replicate if you've ever done both of these. Spending some time on good mornings can really blow up your squat and your deadlift in a hurry. Okay, old school approach number 4 is bands and chains. I've talked about accommodating resistance before a couple times, kind of on both sides of the fence, both defending it and pointing out why you don't exactly need it. But the point here being that if you went back 20 or 30 years, this is how every powerlifter trained at least twice a week. And nowadays, you don't really see it being performed at all. What we now know is that you don't need these exercises to progress like we sort of used to think, but they can be a valuable addition in certain contexts. Just to give you one example, I have certain lifters who are very power-based when it comes to the bench press. They can get virtually anything off their chest, and then they're going to struggle at lockout as weights get heavier. And yes, we could use board presses or narrow grip presses or slingshot work, and sometimes we do. But we've also used bands and we've used chains, and they can also be insanely effective in scenarios like these, so I don't discount them. And finally, old school technique number 5 is supramaximal work. Here I'm talking about movements that allow you to use more weight than you could in the competition exercise, explicitly for the purposes of handling it, adapting to it, and getting used to these loads. Examples of this might be partial range of motion work, like high pin squats or board presses, or it could be something like reverse bands. I don't use these a lot personally, but I do agree that they can be insanely effective in, again, certain contexts. One of which might be when you're going into a meet. It's a few weeks away and the bulk of your volume is at pretty low intensities, which a lot of people's is. These types of exercises can really get you used to handling and being stable under those super maximal loads like you will encounter on meet day. Implementing some heavy holds or maybe heavy walkouts in these situations is one way to get certain lifters more comfortable and confident under loads that they've never approached before. My personal favorite of these has got to be the slingshot on bench press, which is going to give you a 5, maybe 10% boost depending on the type of slingshot that you're using. And I gotta say, every time I've implemented, it's pretty much paid off reliably every single time. And that is it. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for tuning in. If you have questions for me about this or really any other topic, leave them down in the comments for me and I promise I will respond to you. And please click subscribe so you don't miss future powerlifting videos like these. See you next time.